Star Bite, Steve Falconaker, welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to have yet another in our continuing discussions on happiness, where it fits on the change grid, everything related to that. Got some things to finish up from last time around, but Brian sent over a couple of really interesting research articles. I'm going to see if I can chat them over. They're not particularly large, so you guys let me know if you just received the neuroscience of happiness.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then what is this one? Is that the same thing? No, that's maximizing versus satisficing.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Satisficing.
Is that an actual word?
No.
Oh.
No, they're making stuff up.
Okay.
So yeah, I've never heard satisficing.
Satisfying.
Well,
I've heard the word
very
used.
common. It's a word du jour. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, because it's kind of like a combination of satisfying and things being sufficient, so sufficing.
Okay.
So suffice to say, satisfy. Yeah, they've merged two things together, whatever they call that. But anywho, I got partially through the neuroscience of happiness and pleasure before it became far more technical than I can wrap my head around without, taking some time to it. But Brian, where did you get these from? Usually you have to subscribe to some big, online research source to get this level of article.
Yeah, I got it from the school.
So okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot, but there are sites like I think it's called Sci-Fi something that gives out free research.
Oh, that'd be interesting to look at, because usually the stuff that I go looking for would be on like the American is it APA, American Psychological Association or something like that?
Yeah.
And that you have to subscribe to get beyond the whatever they call not the précis, but highlights of whatever the research might be you can get. But
yeah, there's a site called Sci Hub, and it was started as a free an open source
like library resource. Yeah, good. Yeah, and this goes on and on. So anyone who wants to really dig into it, I thought there was a lot of interesting things, and I think I got up as far as hedonic hotspots, but and then I just kept scrolling: loss of pleasure, bridging pleasure, concluding remarks. I should have just started by reading the concluding remarks. Usually that's where the real essence is.
Right, the first that and the abstract I read.
Yeah.
I'll go through and dig through some of their other points that they may be making.
Well, yeah, and usually if I start off reading the front end and the back end of it, because it's a piece of published research and it's being published in a respected journal, I kind of go into it accepting that all the stuff in between is just going to prove whatever they're saying at the end. so that's but again, I'm reading for different purposes, so there you are. So I chatted those over to everybody. We may get around to talking a bit about them today, but I really did want to finish up this little infographic. What did I do with my infographic now? There it is, infographic. I don't like the new PDF reader. You know what it is? I don't like tabs. I like windows. Give me piles and piles of windows all on top of each other, because I will invariably close the window and the window had like 5 tabs. And I'm going like, where did everything go? And then you got to go and kind of, recollect it. All right, let's see. Where did we leave off? That's about happiness. No, that's the very end bit. Okay, here we go. Back. The power of gratitude. Oh, that's right. We were talking about making time for friends. Making time for friends. And I think our comment was that for many of us, spending 6 to 9 hours per day with friends, and I'm imagining what they mean is actively doing something. I mean, Linda and I are certainly together for all day, every day, but she's in her part of the house doing whatever she's up to, and I'm in my part doing whatever I'm up to, and she's doing her thing and I'm doing my thing. So I don't really know that that's being together as much as we just happen to be at the same place coincidentally. So, it was interesting. We had friends over to play cards Tuesday evening, and after 3 hours, I was really fully satisfied. My need for socialization has now been satisfied for a good long while to come. That being said, one of the things that I did read in one of the publications that we get at Sun City West was that this is particularly difficult for people who are extroverted to begin with. Aging is far more difficult for people who are very social than it is for people who are not as social. And that doesn't mean, they're unfriendly. They just don't need to have that level of contact. And I thought that was an interesting thing to reinforce what Kathy had shared with us about the incidence of introversion versus extroversion, at least as Myers-Briggs defines it. So yeah, there you go. There you go. And by the way, extroverted people, do you think they are more likely or less likely to come to move into a community like Sun City West, an over 55 community? I think they're
More likely.
more likely because the whole thing is engineered towards an active lifestyle. And so their little slogan across all these kinds of communities is that if you live in fill in the blank and you're bored, that's your fault. Because there's so much to do, so much to keep you busy. That being said, we do have a lot of people that are very isolated, and luckily neighbors are always watching out for one another just to make sure someone hasn't had a health incident or something like that occur. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. This idea about making time for friends is particularly challenging for extroverted people as they get older. Yeah, thoughts about that?
Seems like we need more of it.
More
like this connecting, because again, there's this battle between hybrid models of work and all these different kinds of things that is still trying to reconcile itself. And some people are like, I just need to reach out and hug someone is what I'm hearing on these
There
calls.
you go. Right.
Not staying on Zoom all day.
Yeah, and in fact, I was reading somewhere about a college campus, maybe it's happening on lots of college campuses, where the young adults are volunteering to be grandchildren for the elderly people in their community. So just so someone's checking in and seeing how they're all doing or whatever. I mean, obviously they have real grandkids, but how it becomes quite a bit of a symbiotic kind of a relationship, because the kids get the benefit, the young adults get the benefit of having the wisdom of an older person, and the older person gets the energy charge that being around younger people first and foremost is going to provide you, but also this idea of they're being checked in on, they're cared about and all that. So have you guys heard about that sort of thing in your own areas?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I've heard about it in Massachusetts. David Brooks of Harvard, he's writing a book, I think it just came out, called From Strength to Strength. And it's this idea of fluid intelligence meeting with crystallized intelligence.
Oh, do tell. What's that all about?
So fluid intelligence is like your capacity to see like abstract things. And it's a lot of young people have the fluid intelligence, they can grasp the technology and those kinds of things readily. But he said what's needed in today's time, and while he's advocating that every workplace should have one 70-year-old, it's crystallized intelligence. That's putting it all together where you can literally see the moving parts and how they connect, and you have a deep understanding of and knowledge of how they can come together for the greater good of everyone.
And that's something that comes with age and wisdom and that sort of thing. Yeah, very interesting.
So that makes people happy. And so they've been experimenting in different communities with, bringing young and old together.
Sure.
In terms of happidness. In fact, he manages a course called Managing Happiness at Harvard that I think you can take it online through one of those, what do you call MOOCs? Massive open online.
Oh yeah. So this is part of their community lifelong learning kind of initiatives. Yeah.
You can audit the course and take it for free.
Oh, well, sweet. Then can we say we're Harvard graduates?
You can get a certificate actually for $149. But
$149. Well,
yeah,
hopefully it comes framed.
yeah. But the audit course, you get availability to most of the aspects. They just don't grade your coursework and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah. Why create workload if it's a free course? So there you go. All right. So anyway, so I certainly appreciate the idea about making time for friends. But as we said last time, and they're reiterating now, it probably has a lot more to do with what the individual's need is for higher levels of socialization. So some of us are perfectly content being left alone. So the next one, power of gratitude. This one I don't have much argument with. In 12 years of research, I've never interviewed a single person with the capacity to really experience joy who does not also actively practice gratitude. Well, Brene, we might be able to talk about some biases in the way you're choosing people to interview. But that being said, how many of you believe that in order to experience joy, you have to also be practicing some level of gratitude?
I do. That
I
makes
do.
sense to
Yeah.
me
I do. I
personally.
agree. Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
I agree. Gotta,
Yeah.
if you're my little line, I don't know who originally coined it, but I've always believed that anybody and everybody can bloom where they're planted. You just have to be able to look at
Hmm.
what's around you and see the value that all that has and be grateful to have whatever that is. Whether it's exactly what you want or not is a totally different discussion. So you're certainly welcome to go out there and expand what your bank of things is to be grateful for. So
Hmm.
that's all great. But I'm still not sure that I understand what joy is other than as um, a rather rare um, experience as opposed to a state of being. So, Kathy, I'm going to kind of throw this your way. Do you make a differentiation between someone who has happiness as kind of like the core essence of their being versus someone who is joyful
Yeah, I
in their
do.
core
I
essence?
do. I think that's what the differentiator is for me. I mean, you can express joy, in
Mhm.
a transient kind of way, but this is the way I see it, and it's the only way I can sort of characterize it without using weird words like bliss or other things. But
Yeah,
but
yeah.
joy is just that state where you are approaching the world, basically saying I'm grateful for what's around me. I love what I'm experiencing. It's a state of mind versus triggered by a specific event
Mhm.
or experience. Does that
Yes,
make
Mm.
sense?
absolutely. And again, I think there's a very big difference between happiness or joy as a response versus happiness or joy as a state of being. And
Mhm.
so then is gratitude the pathway to joy, or what else would you say is kind of like on the developmental side, if we wanted to help our clients find more joy in their life, what's the route we take them on?
Yeah.
You
Mm.
think about
The
that?
route for me has been, is the route that I am on is getting rid of fear. So if you,
Mm.
if your gratitude is a piece of that, but if you're always, I mean, if your default tendency is to be fearful
Ah,
about whatever, whether it's a new experience, whether it's the weather, whether,
right. Yeah.
whatever it is, if you can remove as much of the fear in your life and just know that you will be okay, know that you will be fine, that you
Mhm.
really don't have a lot to fear in your life, that there's really not. That to me is the path to joy, and gratitude is another piece of that. It's not the
Mhm.
same thing by any means, but to me, those are the two things I think that are, and it's that capacity to love,
Mhm.
unconditionally as much as you possibly can, although that's not a very human condition, but
No, no.
to just be able to love what's around you. So that's what
Mhm.
that means, to me.
Okay. Yeah,
That's
very
good. In
good.
fact, Brene Brown says something similar to that because Brene uses, I read a couple of her books that my sisters sent to me, and she uses what she calls a grounded theory of research. Have you heard of that, Kathy?
I have one of her books. I'm not sure. Say that again, Brian. I didn't hear what you said.
She calls it a grounded theory of research. So what she does is she starts out with a hypothesis like others, social
Yeah.
scientists do, but then it becomes the people whom she's asking the questions from dictate the research itself. So it shifts. That's what she calls a grounded theory of research. But she described exactly what you just described. A lot of it is that she found, even for researchers, is unlearning to learn.
Ah,
And that becomes kind of that pathway where you're doing things not, you can experience joy or at least cultivate it without any particular situation that you can label, because she said sometimes we get trapped by the labels themselves.
right,
Yes,
right, right,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Edie, what did you want to share?
Yeah, I think, Kathy, what you were saying, but I think joy is also what you pay attention to. It's kind of the figure ground. I think it's also the nourishment that we get from an environment that
Yeah.
supports us. I think it's also living on purpose. And when I lost 4 to 5 million, and I went from a mansion to being homeless. I had to pee in a pail for 15 months, and I never lost my sense of joy. And people say, "Oh, what an inspiration! How did you do this?" And I sometimes look back at, it was the happiest years of my life. I had nothing but my mind and my computer. There was an electric post outside, so I could plug in my computer. And I was writing my books. I was living life on purpose. I could look at the lake. I didn't give that up. And I never felt a bit a victim or sorry for myself. I never gave up hope. I think that's the other thing. But I can't say I was without joy when I didn't even have a flushing toilet, running water, no electricity for
Yeah.
15 months.
Well,
And I felt joyful.
we were with you when you were going through that. So,
That's right.
and the thing is that we were never really aware of what was actually going on because you were just rolling with whatever the punches were. You were always in a good mood, always figuring out a way to make whatever
Yep.
needed to happen.
Well, and
So
slept in your
Yeah.
office sometimes, T. Do you remember that?
I know. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
Edie, I think that's a perfect example. That is like the example of what I'm talking about. And
Yeah.
I mean, I have never experienced it to that degree, but I know people who have. But that is a beautiful example. So thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting you brought up things in the environment contribute to someone's experience of joy, or these elements that contribute to their joy. And I can certainly relate to that because I know that there are certain places I go, things I do, and it does awaken this experience of joy. But again, I think it's more of a response to something as opposed to a sustained state of being. So, for example, I did a great deal of work in the Netherlands. I have always felt like the Netherlands is my home away from home. Whenever I land in Amsterdam, I feel like I'm home. And whenever I leave, I feel like I'm leaving home, But to fly in to Amsterdam when the tulips are in bloom, because I don't know if you guys have been to that airport, but the planes all come in over hundreds upon hundreds of acres of tulips in full bloom. And they're all in stripes of colors and all that. So it's an astounding thing to see. And every time I see it, it brings a smile to my face and a happy tear to my eye. And I feel like all is well with the world when I see something like that. So there's several things around the planet that have that effect. So, but again, I feel like that's a response more than it is a state of being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's look at these little icons they have there. In one study, people who practice gratitude by jotting down 3 good things that happened each day for 1 week felt happier and less depressed for up to 6 months. Okay, reported better sleep quality and were more likely to engage in healthy behaviors like exercise. So I think that's a very simple little exercise. So if we said we were trying, again, I try to make everything we talk about have some kind of practical application in the work that we all do for ourselves or for our clients, whatever. I have to, I don't know, it's me. I have to figure out a way to insert this into some sort of an approach, a methodology, a system, some sort of a way. And so, like we've been talking about, happiness as a state of being, now joy as a state of being. How do you get there? What's on track? So I like that this says, look, there's a study, write down 3 good things that happen to you each day for a week. And these are some of the results you should achieve. How many of you have done that and experienced that?
Yeah, I do that daily.
Yeah, does it continue to have the same benefit, or is it one of these things with diminishing returns as you do it
I
more
think
and
I
more
experienced
routinely?
it diminishing returns, but I like upgraded the experience. And I think this goes back to what Edie was just talking about, this idea of managing your attention, because we tend to operationalize things that we do over time, and then it just becomes the routine. But if
Yeah.
you connect the purpose behind the routine, that's something different.
Yeah.
So like
Mhm.
I was reading over 36 books a year.
Lord.
So now what I decided to do was break it down into 12, so I can really interact with the book and the content and practice it. And so I have 12 different, one for each month,
Yeah.
and break it down into components where it's like it supports the theme that I choose for the year. So all these things bring joy to me because I'm connecting with something that's expanding my knowledge, expanding my learning.
Hmm.
It makes me happy.
And so when you said you raised the I forget what word you actually used, but kind of raised the bar. Again, that's an upgrid maneuver. So if you start to slip down grid about this, you get these diminishing returns. Well, one thing you do is increase the standard. So maybe instead of writing
Right.
down 3 things, you write down 5 things, or whatever the case may be. But yeah,
Yeah.
anyway. And
I,
Kathy,
I mean,
what's your
yeah, no,
experience?
I mean, I rebel against, this type of thing. Write down 3 things every. I mean, I think it does work. I think it. I
Mm,
mean, I really like it, but I'm more of a proponent of that notion of staying on purpose. So what Edie was talking about.
mm,
So if you, yes, I do make it a point to be grateful every day, to reframe. When I find
sure.
myself getting cranky about something. I reframe it and just say, what do you, just look at it a different way. I mean, that's crazy to look at it the way you're looking at
Hmm.
it. Just
Hmm.
look at it a different way,
Sure.
and it will be different. But it is about being intentional.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I think it's that sense of living intentionally as much as possible, which is also about purpose. But
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
is my intention? And making intention a habit. So gratitude is one piece of it, but to me, I see intention as sort of a higher level thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That where intention, if you can make that your habit, then that allows you to then bring in gratitude more easily and bring in those other things. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's why I like writing it down for me. Because when I write something down and particularly put it in my own language, I get it. So instead of like writing it down like a routine, like they're probably talking about like a to-do list kind of thing, for me, it's a to-be list. And so it's
Hmm.
very, very intentional when I do it. But then it becomes the acting part on that becomes the accountability part. And that's what I survey through the journal entries. Like, okay, at the end of the day, I ask myself, what did I learn? How can I grow? What do I need to develop?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's very,
Hmm.
very specific, and it forces one to um, focus on the attention. What did you put your attention on, and why did it go to that? So that part Edie was talking about in terms of attention management becomes really key parts of the tension management aspect.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, in fact, I pulled up this diagram. I keep looking for isolated layers of the change grid, and then I remind myself, no, you guys should all be fully fluent in this diagram. So I'll just show you the composite. You can see it all interrelates. But going to what Brian just said about kind of a things to be sort of list.
Yeah.
One of the things when I'm teaching people the path of self-discovery or the oracle of the self is I try to help them add a little bit more structure to the green step. And you guys have heard me talk about the 4 aspects of control. What do you hope to gain? What do you hope to lose? What do you not want to gain? What do you not want to lose? Well, there's an even deeper layer of that where we say that generally, and you guys can apply this to your own life and your own client work, but generally when people come to me wanting some help, whatever it is, because they either, it's about 4 words: have, do, be, and feel. So is there something that they want to have or don't want to have? They want to do or don't want to do? They want to be or not want to be? They want to feel or not want to feel? That's those 4 buckets seem to um, um, cover the range of things that my clients have come and asked for. Now, mostly my clients have been businesses and that, but it always ends up becoming at least personal because all these businesses are run by people, so you're going to get their stuff in there as well. So I've always felt like there's these 4 buckets: have, be, do, and feel, and it's either empty or it's full. And I'm trying to either fill it up or I'm trying to empty it, depending on what the situation happens to be. So have, do, be, and feel seems to be the range of things.
I always see, I don't know if any of you see this, but they talk about the 3 out of the 4 that you're talking about, have, do, be. But they oftentimes, by they, I mean the gurus always said that if you reverse that order, then it sets up this idea that you can experience the gratitude. So in other words, most people say, I don't have, therefore I can't do, therefore I can't be. And it says the comes first. So
and I've never thought of them as being in a particular sequence.
Yeah, I've read a lot about that. I don't know, have any of you seen that?
No, but it makes perfect sense because I mean it makes perfect sense because you are in a state of being and then move to action. And think about it as coming from the PowerPoint.
Right.
So you're moving into action from a place where you are, whatever it is you're feeling or experiencing, then you're being, and then you're able to do out of choice and then have, as opposed to, that feels right to me.
And then I like the idea that it ends up with feel, because, we talk about in pride-based leadership, ultimately what this fuel is that drives the human spirit. Is pride and a whole lot of variations on that, but a sense that you matter, a sense that what you do matters. So that's where that whole idea about purpose and mission are kicking into play. So well, that's interesting. I've never thought about that. Someone write that down, send me an email.
I did,
about
T.
Thank you. Have, be, do, and feel as a sequence. And maybe just like we talk about for the path of self-discovery, bad things happen if you jumble up the order. So it may be the very same thing, that if we jumble up these have, do, be, feel, and maybe there's another one, I don't know, I've just always heard it before.
No, and I would argue, T, it's not have, be, do, and feel, it's feel, be, do, and have.
Right.
Yeah, and I wonder how many people are just out there doing and aren't really even thinking about feeling, how it might make them feel. I mean, I think right now in the world, we've got a lot of horrible things that are going on, and all at the heart of every single bit of it is going to be somebody who's making some decisions to do certain things. And you just wonder, like, are they so trapped right now in the process of doing that they aren't really thinking about what they're doing? Like, and again, I don't want to in any way minimize anything that anyone's going through, but you've seen these images now of Mariupol that the place is obliterated. And I'm thinking, like, okay, if I was some other country and I wanted to conquer a particular area, it has to be because there's something about that area that is either strategically important to me or offers resources that I want for my own agenda. Why would I bring an entire city to rubble?
Well,
So,
there really is something to this because, and not that I'm defending, I'm just saying that Ukraine has a very high, I think distributes something like 90%
oh yeah.
of a particular rare metal
Yep.
that is used
Absolutely.
for things like catalytic converters.
Yep. Yep.
And so there may be a nefarious strategic reason why some of this is happening beyond just craziness.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, something's really driving it, and I tried to find out. No, I've learned a lot of things about the Ukraine along the way. That the Ukraine is considered to be one of the world's breadbaskets. So its agricultural output is astounding,
Yep.
and it has a lot of natural resources. It has a lot of minerals. It has all kinds of things. So I can understand why someone who might want that territory, I just don't understand obliterating all the structures that if you
Yeah,
are successful in taking over the country, don't
I,
you need these buildings? I'm
I
just,
think I think they want the land. They don't care what's on it. They want to be able to go from
oh,
Russia. They want to be able to go from Russia down to Crimea
oh,
with their
yeah.
equipment and with their tanks and with everything else.
Yeah, well, it
And
just seems like someone really wasn't, well, why would I even think anyone really is thinking about the whole thing? Yeah.
right.
All right. So let's before I forget it, I wanted to get back to something Kathy was saying about intention. So remember these engagement rings. And so let's just revisit those real quickly and see about the power of intention. So way up top, way down below, we have awareness at the extreme. So this band I'm scrolling through right now, oops, sorry, didn't mean to relocate it, but that one has hyper awareness, hypo awareness, and then coming in grid or out grid a little bit more, there's just awareness. So didn't know how else to make a distinction, but on these areas of the change grid, people are very much aware of things happening around them, and they're having sometimes upgraded responses, sometimes mid-grid responses, sometimes down-grid responses about whatever it is they're aware of. But what happens and is, I think, essential for deliberate change to occur is that someone has to move from being aware of something to formulating some sort of an intention around it. I don't think anything much, I mean, lots of accidental things happen that cause change to occur. But as far as this deliberate change, taking charge of your life, you have to formulate some sort of an intention. Sooner or later, actively or passively, there's got to be an intention that comes along with it, because that intention is going to ultimately steer you to how to be engaged in what the actual work of the change happens to be. So does that resonate, Kathy, with what you were saying about doing things, living intentionally? Yeah, you're muted there, but lots of people, I think, are end up. Oh, there you go. Go ahead, Kathy.
yeah, sorry, I was talking to myself here. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is. I mean, it's putting intention to what it is, so that moves you to action. The intention
Yes.
helps move you to action.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And what I think is interesting about how the layers now overlay is where we talk about where that state of happiness starts to become more likely is inside of the green circle. When we're between the green and the red, life is happening and we're responding to it. So talking about the location of actual happiness, we said happiness tends to come when people are accomplishing things. And accomplishing things accidentally versus accomplishing things intentionally feel very different to me. And so I would probably say that unless you intended to do it, I don't know that you've actually accomplished it, because accidental stuff happens all the time. But that would resonate then about happiness has an intention at its as a kind of a prerequisite in the state, or as a base in the state.
I think as a state of being, it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not necessarily transitory happiness, but I
Right.
think
Yeah.
But I think a sustained, a sustained joy or a sustained happiness has, like what Edie was talking about, it's an intention. It's an intention to
Yeah,
live life a certain way.
right. There it is. There it is. Yep, 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 yep. Okay, very interesting stuff. Let's go back to our diagram. I think there's just the one more section here. 5 ways to boost your happiness instantly. Okay, spend 5 minutes doing something to brighten a loved one's day. Okay. Email someone and thank them for something they did for you. All right, that goes back to the whole gratitude, displaying appreciation. Have a meaningful conversation with a good friend. Take 30 seconds to help someone who needs it. Close your eyes and relive the happiest moment of your life. Okay, I don't have any argument that those things wouldn't boost your happiness in the moment. Anyone thoughts about these? I do have an issue with it, a fundamental issue, but I don't disagree that these might make you happy in the moment. And if you did these routinely each and every day, maybe they would contribute to a state of happiness. But my issue is that it seems to imply that happiness occurs when I do something external. Like, so other than savoring a memory, I mean, close your eyes, relive the happiest moment of your own life. But otherwise, it seems like my happiness is somehow reliant on me doing something involving others. Yeah.
It is that concept of doing rather than being, and it's
Yeah.
different. And that's what makes the difference, I think, between sustained joy and happiness. It's a state of being rather than, and then it can translate into a state of doing.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Because it's where
But
you're coming from. If you're
and what the doing does, what it helps with, is that it creates a habit pattern of operating a certain way, which can then become a state of being if you have the intention to bring it there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Reading this, it reminds me yet again of an episode of Star Trek, and I think I've shared this with you guys before, but I think it demonstrates it, and I've always felt that episode was disturbing on a couple of levels. But it's from Star Trek Voyager. Voyager's trying to get home, and they're a very, very long way, and it'll take 75 years for them to get home at the rate they can travel. So they're always looking for ways to cut some time off of that trip so they can just get home. Well, they stumble across this planet, and this planet has a lot of really cool people, and they somehow or another end up beaming down while there's a little festival going on, like maybe it's a marketplace or whatever. And the thing in this marketplace is that you don't buy anything. People give it to you because it will make you happy. It will bring you joy. So Captain Janeway sees this piece of fabric, and she just goes, it's the most beautiful fabric she'd ever seen, light and airy, ethereal, all these descriptors are going on. And this guy, very first time they've met, says, then you must have it. And, she's going like, well, we don't have currency. We don't do it. He goes, no, you must have it. And so he gives it to her, and she's all very appreciative. And later on, they find out that the civilization has the ability to transport you to anywhere in the known universe in an instant. Far distances, far, far greater than anything. So they're thinking maybe they can transport the entire ship closer to Earth, and there's a technology involved, and the Voyager crew asks for that technology. And they can't give the technology because it's dependent on the planet. And so Voyager tries to figure out a way that they can steal it. So I had a fundamental problem there to begin with. They don't steal stuff. But anyway, the point of all this is that once that happens, this society that is all engineered about bringing joy to other people suddenly become very aggressive and very threatening, and everything all about it. So it's a society that basically gets off on getting everybody else to experience joy or happiness or pleasure in the moment. And because that person is experiencing that joy, the individual ends up feeling the level of joy they want. But if you don't accept their gift, or you reject whatever they're doing, or you criticize or whatever, they go off the deep end to the other extreme. And so when I thought about that, I've always believed that everything on Star Trek is trying to teach some sort of contemporary lesson to whoever's viewing it. I look at this and kind of go, am I doing something to brighten a loved one's day because I just want to do that from a giving spirit? Or am I doing it because I want something in return? Am I emailing someone and genuinely thanking them for something they did for me because I genuinely wanted to show the gratitude? Or do I have some other motive behind doing that? So whether it's 30 seconds to help someone who needs it or whatever, what is driving me to do that? Am I using those people and exploiting their need for help in order to create some sort of state for myself? Or is it really a selfless act of giving?
Well, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of intention making the difference between a light and a dark act. So
Yeah,
that an act can look good. I mean, the nature of the act, it could be the same act, but the nature of the act changes based on the intention.
right.
Mm.
Right. Like, I'll give you something that really bothered me. A couple of weeks ago, we went to see Vaktiv in performance at the Scottsdale Center for the Performing Arts. And like all those kinds of facilities, I don't care if it's a museum, a theater, whatever, at the back of every one of their programs, or slapped up on the wall, is a list of all the benefactors. So, oh, they're at this level, they gave this much, and oh, we appreciate blah, blah, blah. And I've always thought that the greatest gift you can give is one that's anonymous. And the thought that, oh no, the reason why I'm giving you this money is because I can now leverage that in the world of public perception about how good and noble our company is, or how important our family may be.
Yeah.
And I just find the whole thing profoundly distasteful, even though I understand that it ends up becoming vitally important when it comes to fundraising for these kinds of organizations. I just think that wanting recognition for something that's supposed to be a selfless act is, it's it's against its own intention. So I go,
Right.
like, that's their intention isn't to give money and help. Their intention is to buy publicity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I read about that in the book. I forget the author's name. The book is titled "Winners Take All," and he talks about the charade of the elite. So you have these big companies and big philanthropists and big companies like Amazon will come out to say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, when all of that was going on. But at the same time, people are like, okay, Black Lives Matters, but how about you pay your employees well?
yeah, yep, yep, yep.
You have to urinate in trash cans because I mean they're not getting breaks, but Black Lives Matter. Yeah, okay. So it
Yep.
becomes a charade, really.
Yeah, yep. I I don't remember the company. Maybe you guys do this with something that I saw in the past month or so, but it was talking about a very large corporation who donated a substantial amount of money to a charity, and then spent 10 times that amount of money on the advertising campaign to showcase the fact that they gave that amount of money to the
Wow.
charity.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And I'm talking about, I think they gave a 500,000 and then spent 5 million on the advertising campaign, or so you just go like, so, wow.
But isn't it a win-win? Because no matter what the motive is, if my goal is to raise money for the symphony,
Right.
then, you know what I mean? And I'm just thinking, but when it's out of shame, I'm looking back. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, Catholic Lutherans, but they would post
Oh,
what
yeah.
everybody donated to the church. Now that I
Right.
see is different because, yeah, they were using embarrassment and shame to get people to pay. do.
Right.
And so
Yep.
that comes, you know what I mean? There's a negative intention there to shame people. It was,
Yeah, and so that's a great illustration, because it means that even the charity can be guilty of this manipulation, not just the individual. So I completely accept the fact that in order for all these things that we really do value to be able to exist, that they need to raise money. And there are a whole lot of people, I mean, face it, greed and vanity are very powerful motivators. And so fine, leverage that, exploit that, go right ahead and do that. But I do think there's a set of people, I'm obviously one of them, that when I look at all that, I go, if you genuinely cared about that charity, or you genuinely cared about them, you would just give freely, and not want the recognition, do it anonymously, because I think there's a greater reward you're going to receive beyond the superficial reward that you might get. So, yeah.
Yeah,
And
and that reward is often, I guess, to some abstract, in that they can't realize it necessarily in the moment.
right.
So that becomes the hard part. And many of the Asian cultures that I lived in, their philosophy was simple in terms of want for yourself what you will want for others.
Want for yourself what you want for yeah, Brian, you disappeared there sound wise for just a second, but want for yourself what you want for others.
Right.
Very good. Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, and well, we've been watching Bridgerton. Anybody, any of you guys watching Bridgerton?
I
No?
never heard of it.
I'm not watching the second season. I watched the first. I just haven't gotten around to the second season.
Yeah, it's good. It's very different, but it's really very good. It's also very short. There's only like 7 episodes in the whole season. But anyway, it's well worth watching. But one of the things you kind of learn about the Regency period, and how society seemed to operate during that time period, is that people didn't throw a party because they wanted their, to throw a party for their friends and have some fun. There were massive ulterior motives driving every single one of these balls, these, whatever the event happens to be. And so at a certain point in time, you just look at it and go, was this really about happiness in that moment, or was it, a way to, it's no secret. One of the big things in the Regency period was what they called the season, where all of the young women of society would travel to a variety of places during the season in the hopes of meeting an eligible bachelor, so that good marriages could be arranged and all that sort of stuff. So it was, basically a meat market with better clothing. But nevertheless, the society was based on that, and it was probably that way for a very long time. So you just kind of go back, well, then what was happiness? How was that defined? And it was that they thought they might have even been experiencing a state of happiness because they did have wealth, and they did have prestige, and they did have power, and they did have all the little trappings that came along with all that sort of stuff. But none of them actually seem all that happy. So it's
A great example of that. I don't know if anybody's been watching The Gilded Age. But but that's a good one. I mean, if you want to see it in an American context,
yeah.
it's a great example about the robber baron era.
Yep.
It's vintage.
Well, and even Downton Abbey, if you guys think about that, Downton Abbey was about that time period where American young women of wealth in America would actually be offered title if they would go to the England or whatever and marry into the family. Now, of course, the way that the laws were set up then, all of that woman's wealth suddenly becomes her husband's wealth. And but they got their position. They got to be the Duchess. They got to be the whoever, the lady of the house or whatever. So yeah. But anyway, my point is that I don't really know that true happiness deserves 80% of the things involving other people. Where's the fine? So let's go to these bottom points and see if there's anything else here. So find your flow. Many people are happiest in a flow state, engaging in an activity that's enjoyable, requires a degree of skill, and is just enough of a challenge that you can feel in the zone, losing all sense of time. Yeah, we've all talked about that before. That comes from Csikszentmihalyi's work on flow psychology. It would characterize the heart line of the power response state, but anyone who's studying flow doesn't spend as much time talking about what happens out of flow. But flow to me is just one of the elements that someone is going to experience when they find themselves on the heart line of power. So that's good. No argument. Flow is a good thing to have. Meditate on this. People who regularly practice mindfulness meditation have increased activity in the left prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for calm and happiness. Brian, did you know that the left prefrontal cortex seems to be where happiness resides?
No.
No,
I know
'cause
you do have the anterior cingulate cortex is that mediator in the brain that lets us know or helps us to filter good or bad. I don't know if that's what they're referring to, maybe.
yeah. See, I
But
guess
there
I've
is a
always,
lot of research on that, though, about meditation and in terms
yeah,
of
that I don't argue with. The whole idea when it came to meditation, whether it's mindfulness or any of the many forms of meditation that have been part of history as long back as anyone's recorded it. I don't argue with the front half of this article of this statement at all. I just didn't think there was a particular area of the brain that had been identified as where happiness resides.
no, that doesn't
So,
exist. Now,
You know,
granted,
that's interesting. Psychology Today years ago had an article that left brain people were happier, and I feel pretty happy all the time, and I'm a extreme right brainer. But I do remember being shocked. So there has been research done on this whole left brain thing associated with happiness. That's all I just remember reading.
well, because that would seem to imply that happiness is more of a cognitive process than it
right,
is
right, and a conscious one, and those processes on the left tends to be slower, right? So when we're talking about emotion or happiness as an emotion, emotions are processed almost immediately. Like those systems work like 10 times faster than any cognitive thing. That's why you can feel before you actually reason as to what am I feeling.
Interesting. So it just makes you wonder, is happiness the result of a logical process? Or is
I think
happiness?
it's part of it, and that's why I'm saying it's all of those systems working together that it culminates into this point. Because again, the brain operates top down, bottom up communication in terms of processing, and so these sensory capacities is bottom up.
Yeah.
So it literally goes up the brain stem, and that's why again it's not subject to any cognitive things for you to feel anything. You just feel it. Then we put the labels on it. It's good, it's bad, this feels, great or whatever.
But do you think it's a time period thing too? Because emotions today, I mean, suicide is up. People are not as happy as when my parents were growing up. They were all at the polka halls 3 times a week. They're all laughing. Exactly. There was just that, so I think some of that is a reflection that emotions generally don't go to the positive for current people.
Yeah, I was going to ask the group that, because I'm thinking like even our ideas about happiness and cultivating happiness seems to be more difficult in today's time, to Edie's point. But think about it. We have all this technology out and kids, and this idea of loneliness and things are just off the charts right now. So this technology is supposed to make us better, right? And it's
and I think maybe part of that is that I would like to think that happiness thrives in simplicity. And that the more complicated things get, the more activity that ends up becoming a normal part of daily life. It's almost like the complexity interferes with happiness.
Mm.
So I'm making that up obviously because it's just a thought, but
Probably a good point,
Well,
actually. I
and
go back to what
complexity.
Kathy was saying,
yeah,
intention, right? So it seems like the more technology come out, we're outsourcing critical thinking, we're outsourcing self-permission, we're outsourcing all these different kinds
You're breaking up.
yeah,
of.
you've disappeared, Brian.
Yeah, it seems like we're
Oh, there you are.
outsourcing a lot to
Yeah,
the technology or an algorithm to actually put in the work, be intentional about these things. That's what it seems like to me.
yeah,
But complexity demotivates. And if you're not motivated,
right,
then you're not getting the joy of achievement. I
right.
just have to say, there's a couple upstairs with two little kids. I have kayaks, I have boats, I've invited, they have not been outside once in almost a month.
Oh
And
my,
so, yeah, when we talk about nature, there's a whole book on how nature nourishes us. And yeah, not 1 minute have they gone out on the dock, done nothing. And we've had weather, in the 70s, it's pleasant.
sure.
So that concerns me. But I think the other thing about happiness is it is dependent on experiences and events. And anything that is dependent has the qualities of an addiction. It's dependency.
Mm,
And there's never enough, whether you're talking about cocaine or happiness, whenever you're in that dependent process, it's never enough. So I think whether it's suicide or why people are so unhappy today, it's part of that dependency. Just had to
yeah.
bring that in.
No,
Yeah.
that's very interesting because again, there's got to be a connection between happiness and dopamine. And so, and if dopamine is also associated with addictive processes, then, this again, it's kind of like when I'm trying to figure out where does happiness as a genuine state of being um, morph into happiness as a toxic way of avoiding life or whatever. I don't know. It just feels like it's always felt to me that anything, I don't care what it is, anything taken to an extreme can become problematic.
Yeah.
And yeah, so now this little last section, and then we'll be finished with this last little piece here. The happiest countries, that's 2019. You guys do a little Google search for the happiest countries
It
on earth
used
right
to
now.
be Denmark.
It's updated.
It used to be Denmark years ago. I
Yeah,
know that.
yeah, and now it's back to Finland, but there's it tends to be Scandinavian countries. That seems to be that, but it's
I
changing.
always heard that the happiest country was the Netherlands.
Yeah, and I think they're in position 6 right now. So it does kind of change from one year to the next. But the thing that I want to know is what were the criteria that they actually used? And why are those criteria considered to be important? Like, for example, these things are correlated with higher national happiness. Now, that doesn't mean that these are the things that they used to gauge who the happiest countries are. I'd love to know what were the criteria there. But nevertheless, they said that happy countries have a higher gross productive weight, gross something,
Domestic product.
gross domestic product, thank you, per capita, fine, freedom to make life choices, generosity, longevity. I get it, but when I think about people that are in Finland, in any of these countries, even Switzerland, I don't know that all of them have the volunteer kind of culture that we have in the US. I know the US is very highly rated when it comes to the level of volunteer behaviors we have in donations and all that we make. I do know they live a long time. That's fine. I do know they're far more progressive.
I mean, I look at the difference, just what's slapping me in the face, and I look at the difference between the happiest countries and the least happy countries. Is the least happy countries are those countries that are in war and are constantly being invaded.
Right.
And they also happen to be, for the most part, third world, of color, countries of color versus countries that are kind of on their own, white Western European, so I don't know what that criteria is. I mean, it sounds like that's almost a function of what happens to people in those countries versus somebody would have to prove to me that it's not a function of what happens to those
Right.
countries.
Yeah, exactly.
Put it that way. Yeah.
You could also, I'm also wondering how this maps to spiral dynamics, because it would seem to me that happiness as a state of being is much further evolved in terms of spiral dynamics than people who are still fighting and using the heavy red and orange kinds of levels, where people were fighting for territory and wanting to control people, and people sacrificed their own beliefs and thoughts to some authority that's imposing itself. That's a lot of that's very down on the spiral dynamic. And if we look at Maslow's hierarchies, this whole idea that the highest thing we could ever achieve is self-actualization. If you were to look at spiral dynamics, that would resonate. And so maybe these kinds of countries, and I mean, I'm glad we're not at the bottom, but I would like to think we could be better than we are, but maybe that's part of what's going on as well.
Yeah, I see some of their criteria in terms of World Happiness Reports, and things like social environment, sustainable development, human well-being.
Yeah.
The urbanization or the lack thereof, or the balance.
Yep.
If you just look at the change grid, I mean, isn't it about degree of control you have over your life?
Right. Exactly right.
Mhm.
Yep. I did that. So the most important factor in happiness, researchers have found, is social support, having someone to count on in times of trouble. It's interesting. I still don't know, as valuable as I think that is, and as, how would I say, as important, as vital as that is for someone's sense of well-being, I don't really know that that's happiness.
Mhm.
Maybe it just takes away fear.
Well, right. And that's the whole idea. So I'm happy when I can escape things that are causing me problems in any way, shape, or form, causing me pain in any way, shape, or form. And I'm happy when I'm accomplishing things that I wanted to do. I think that's what we were talking about before. But having someone to count on in times of trouble, I agree. That's a super, super important thing for everyone to have throughout their whole life. But I don't know that just having that, or that the most important factor for me to be happy, is that I have to have that.
But that puts us in the danger zone, because that's dependent again on forces outside oneself. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
That's
are
my
people-
issue.
I agree.
Yeah,
That's my
yeah.
issue.
It's not about being, it's about, and it's only part way up the Maslow hierarchy.
Right.
Mhm.
There you are. Yep.
You know,
Exactly.
So yeah, there's a bias in this, I think.
There's a big bias. So I'll end today's call by saying thank you very much, Happify, for putting this together. You've given us a few hours of some very good conversation. We agree with it in large part, but we have opportunities to refine it for you. So there you go. There you go. Okay, so with that, I think we're done for the day. I think we're done with this topic for a while, although I do want to take a glance at those two research articles that Brian sent over. And I also